everyone, and welcome to another of our Truth Series conversations. Today, we are going to welcome our beautiful friend, Jacqui Bushell. Hi, Jacqui.
Gorgeous to see you all. Thank you.
And hi, Deni.
Hi, it's so beautiful to see you, Jacqui. Welcome.
Oh, it's a delight to be here.
We're very excited to share this with you today. But just to introduce you to the people that are listening to our podcast, I'm just going to read your bio because it's so beautiful and describes exactly who you are and who you've been to me anyway, in all the years that I've been working with you. So Jacqui has been loving the wild abundance of the earth for much of her life. She is the founder of the Sacred Presence School of Embodied Wisdom and the creator of Magdalene oils for anointing, which I've used on many occasions. They're beautiful. She's an inspiring teacher, storyteller, transformational healing practitioner, Reiki teacher, and plant spirit alchemist. And for 30 years, Jacqui has been facilitating women's circles, workshops, training programs, and retreats around the world, which both Deni and I have had the privilege of being on. And you just are here to enhance the deep sense of belonging through reconnecting with nature and the sacred feminine. So welcome, Jacqui. It's a joy to have you here today.
Oh, it's absolute pleasure. And I just have to say, the questions that you're bringing up around truth and the conversations around this just really touched my heart, and they're precious and delicious. So thank you.
Oh, we've been blown away actually by these conversations, and and I think that they've gone so much deeper than we were expecting them to, but they've just been such joyful experiences each and every time we've had somebody come in and share their truths with us. So it's an honor to have you here today.
So we might as well start off, Jacqui, with your first truth and get straight into it.
Oh, there's so many things that weave in and through this. It was actually quite difficult coming up with 3 truths, which meant it was useful because it meant teasing things out to come up with a something. And I realized how much of what I'm pondering, contemplating, and sitting with is actually a relational experience where one thread leads to another, to another, to another. So to draw one out was actually quite a challenge. And the first one that came that felt so clear to me is this actually was very much I guess brought to me with a story that I wrote last year. I was for about 7 months down in Victoria, living in isolation in the bush, surrounded by about 1 million trees and a river through the backyard. And I was writing fairy tales for a lot of the year. And one was about belonging. And it was about a stinky giant who was wrestling with separation, I guess you could say. And the whole point of it at the end was that belonging is not an option, that it's not a choice. And so much, I guess, of my own journey and of connecting in with others has been around where do we feel a deep sense of belonging? Where do we feel and how do we feel homeness in ourself and in our in where we're living or where we feel called to put in roots? And particularly, I guess, for so many of us in Australia, if where we come from other lands and other countries and we're not part of the 80,000 year heritage of Indigenous people here, then coming here as migrants or coming here as refugees and having other lands where the bones of our ancestors lie and feeling the connection with those places, how do we bring that into this land where we're not able to directly participate in that 80,000 year heritage? Those stories are not my stories, and it feels like appropriation if I start to try and draw them into my being. And so there's just been so many questions about belonging and longing and home. And then I realized all that really is we're deeply embedded in a relational experience with the earth, and there's nothing that can take us out of that except our mind. And that we just have this, I guess, cognitive sense of separation or of not anchoring in, which is a really valid question to sit with. And yet we are deeply anchored and embedded and can never be outside of the web. So
that feels, it feels like there's so many layers. I see what you mean about the threads, because I'm just sitting with that, and there's so many layers to that. And I mean, belonging, that word belonging brings up so many places, and I so feel that as someone that comes from so many different lands ancestrally, and feeling that sense of where are my roots, where do I dig into the earth from that point of view, and that appropriation piece. When is it not mine, and when can I not claim it for some reason? And there's so many levels there, because we can go to earth, but then we're humans, and on a human level there's so many rules around appropriation that feel true and uncomfortable. And where do you sit with where those two places sit?
Yes. And particularly at this time now, where there's so much upheaval going on, there's, I'll just come back to your question in it more directly in a moment, but there's all the various levels. There's the belonging in our body and in relationship to what's happening in the world over these 2 years. There's the belonging in our culture, or the choosing to be an exile to our culture. There's the belonging in where we're living. There's the yearning and how to find a place of fitting in. And here we are, held in this country here in Australia, or wherever you're listening into. And there's so many layers and levels of culture within that. And that's been really something that I've sat with and questioned, because I want to be true to what there is in me, and respectful and honoring of what there is that is anchored in place around me, and in the Indigenous people who have had to try and find some way of reconciling 250 odd years of utter disruption. And I had an experience last year. As you know, I tell stories, and there was a couple of stories that were sitting deeply in my being that have worked me strongly for a couple of years. And I was sitting on the land and hadn't seen people in a long time, and I was wanting to tell stories to the land. So what I was doing, because it didn't feel right to tell this Anglo-Celtic story of Rhiannon to the land, because it's not Australian. And so I was looking for, well, what stories do you want to tell, land? And I was writing down the stories that were coming to me. And then what I asked was, well, what do I do with the stories that are working me? And how do I find expression for them here? And the answer was, oh, it made me weep. The answer was, well, are you not you? And are you not here? And are you not part of the enfolding within us? Is there not everything that you are, and everything that you have been, and everything that you will be, not present here in this moment, in the hologram of what this place is? How can you think of not telling your story, because it's part of you and we embrace you? There is always a place for you, because you are here you can never not be enfolded. So tell your story. So I told the story of Rhiannon to the tree and to the river and to the sky and to the house and to my heart, and kept telling it. And each time I told it, I realized something more about myself in the way that it was being reflected back. And I also had the deep experience of that this story is not a disruption, because I am offering this story as part of my being. It's an offering of presence. And in that way, there was a receptivity to it. And I realized that it's so much about where I'm at in me, in my own presence, and how I'm allowing myself to listen in with the land. And it started, I know that's a very sideways approach to the rich question that you asked. And I feel that there's so many other conversations that are being asked of in your question, Deni, and conversations that would be really important to have. And for me, it was about, how do I find my place in bringing in some of the cultures and the resonances in me into this place here. And it came back to, how am I listening? How am I present? How am I receiving and being received? So it brought it back into a deeper relational experience for me. Actually, it sort of, what it also brought up for me was in thinking about Aboriginal art. And I never used to be able to understand, and there's still so much that I don't understand in the richness of Aboriginal art. But for example, a portrait of an Indigenous person, you don't see what we would draw of a face and a nose and a background. You see lines and dots and circles and spirals. You don't see a 2D representation. You see a multidimensional relational experience. And I realized, when I look at Indigenous art, is that they must only perceive in relationships of an ongoing dynamic with land, with plant, with air, with water, with ant, that to draw somebody like, I'm banging, sorry, my microphone's banging there, to draw this is a separation, because it's delineating me out of my relationships. And that spun my head around in realizing, how much am I only seeing me or other? How much am I actually seeing we and us? And I realized how small that perception was of us.
Oh my goodness.
Just shivers with that answer.
So much in that, Jacqui, that I actually don't even know where to start. But what I do know, what this has reminded me of, is just how amazing it is to be in the presence of your wisdom, because you always bring things through in such a beautiful way. That discussion, just that topic that we were talking about there, just opened my heart to just how I feel when I go out to the land and have that deep connection. And everything you said really sung to me in that way, but I have no words to reflect back to you on it, other than the deep feeling of it. It's brought up so much emotion for me, and it's beautiful. So thank you. I'm going to listen to this again in a different environment, when I can actually sink into those words a little bit more. But I just thank you for bringing those through. They're beautiful.
I think it's really about it. Well, there's different levels of it, isn't there, always? But how do we find our own individual relationship with our body, with our presence? Because I don't believe that you can be really present with the land unless you can be anchored and grounded and present in your body. So for me, telling stories was a way of bringing myself more within my body and within the land. It was a way of bringing bringing in that, I guess, broadening my awareness, broadening my perception. And I'm really touched by what you say, Fiona, because it is, I think we need to allow ourselves to feel so deeply moved, to be moved to tears and by the beauty and the wildness and the strangeness and the heartbreak again and again and again, because that brings us home into our feeling self, our feeling body. And I think one of the biggest issues that we've had or around this question of belonging is our disconnection, and how to find a way of allowing ourselves to develop that relationship personally as well as culturally. Yeah.
It's just so, I just love the depth you bring to that, and so many things. Like, there's just so much going off in me right now that just feels so true. And one thing that's coming up for me right now is the idea that we lived under this time of guru for so long, and there was somewhere between us and above us. And it feels like that's what you're talking to with the earth, is that there's been so many places of disconnection that we could say, I don't belong because of this rule, or I don't belong because of that. Whereas if you strip all of that away and just come into relation with earth, then that's where you find your true belonging and your true relationship with self and with earth.
Yes, I've actually just posted a poem on Facebook which started off with, I can't remember the exact words, but basically the worst thing we've ever done as humans is to put God in the sky. And to also then create, as you're saying, a hierarchy, a mediator, whether it's a priest or a government or a parent or some other authority figure, to take away direct knowing, because that's essentially what it is that we are. Actually, something's just coming to mind, a part of a story that, just a minute of it, and it's a story about the woman who became a fox. And just to dive into the middle of this, which is essentially about a woman who was in a dangerous situation, and she got out, and she made the decision of, I am walking away from this. I am going down that road and I am discovering what I am. And she had that rising of energy and jubilation of, I've done it. And as soon as she walked around the corner on that road of freedom, she was caught by a giant, by an ogre, who grabbed her up and said, wow, here's dinner, shut her in a yurt. It was a Eastern Russian story. Put her in a yurt and locked her in and said, I'm going to get some wood, create the fire, and we'll cook you on the way back. And so she immediately went into, oh boy, I have lost. I've basically just jumped out of the frying pan into the fire. And she sat there, she couldn't find a way out, and she prayed. And she prayed and prayed, oh, intuition, oh, divine one, show me a way from here. Let me have that little voice inside me to speak and give me the wisdom of what I will do. And she prayed and she meditated and tried to get into high alpha brainwave so that she could settle. And yes, I know that the word will come. And finally, just as the sun's just beginning to set, she hears this still deep voice inside of her. And at last, the word of wisdom. And the voice said, look up. And she looked up. And what she hadn't seen before is that the rafters were covered in animal skins, of animals of all shapes and colors. And the little voice inside her said, become raven. Become raven. So she reached up and she took down the raven skin and started to put it on, and kept trying to put it on, and the darn thing didn't fit. And she kept trying, and the bloody raven skin wouldn't fit her. And it was like, I've been betrayed by God. I've been betrayed by that voice. I believed you. And how could and you probably had that experience in your life in that dark night where I trusted you and you've gone. And she sat in that for a moment. And then the light went down just a little more, and it shone through a crack in the door, and it lit up something in the roof, and it was curiosity that made her look up. And she saw the light shine on the beautiful, rich, orangey red pelt of a fox. And something made her reach up and draw that pelt down, and she put it on, and it fit beautifully. And immediately she sniffed, and she could smell where the breeze was, and she dug underneath the yurt and ran out. And she was free. And the story goes on where she had then had a question of, well, what am I? Am I fox? Am I woman? How do I find what is true in myself? And that led into another part of the story. But why I love that one and hold it so preciously is in order for her to find her way and to become something other than and more than what she was, to come into the richness of a truer aspect of her nature, she needed to blend intuition with curiosity. She needed to come home to her wild instinctual wisdom. She had to come home to her body and to be able to listen with both her soul, spirit, her heart, and with that gut level instinct of her belly. And I think that that is what is so called for now, is the truth of the body, the wisdom of nature, and to be able to listen in on those levels, which bring us into a wider perception, as well as, I guess, what my next truth would be, which is the truth that nature operates in balance. It doesn't argue. It doesn't have to go, oh, what will I do? It just responds with what's there. So for me, that story is an invitation to listen, to not just have the transcendent experience or to work with the ones that mediate the transcendent experience, but to bridge them, which is, I guess, about living as heaven on earth, living as spirit and body together.
Let's dive more into that second truth.
Yeah.
Because I can instantly see Fee and I just go, when you said this.
Become fox. Yes. Yes. And I love that about curiosity. Maybe curiosity is also another truth of curiosity that leads to us to question things, and curiosity that leads us to wonder, and curiosity that broadens and widens our perception and brings in courage and brings in hope. I was just sitting the other day with hope and hopelessness and realizing that you can't, well, hope is a choice, but that we can return to over and over, but without curiosity and without wondering, without courage, then how do we keep looking at things like your beautiful questions around what are truths? And so for me, the truth of the wisdom of nature, that nature only ever operates in balance, that this actually came from a bigger question that I had around what on earth do I trust in these times of change? And I threw out the whole idea of trust as a childlike notion that's related to, I want something that is safe. I want something reliable. And if I don't trust you, this person, this thing, then I'm going to discard you. It just seemed I was reading everywhere about, I don't trust you, or keep me safe, or I feel betrayed. And I was sitting a lot with that notion of, well, maybe trust is an infantile thing. What can we rely on? What is it that is reliable? And I realized I don't trust myself because I'm not reliable. Fear can come in. I can believe one perception in one day, something else in another day. And so if I don't trust myself, I don't trust governments or the people. I don't trust people to keep me safe. And so I threw away the idea and started working with the language of maybe surrender is a better word, or what can I surrender to, or faith, or yield. And then I realized, no, something deeper than that. I actually trust the earth. And I trust, because I trust the earth, I do trust my body. I don't trust my mind, but I trust the earth, and I trust that we come into being through love. And I trust that level of love, and that is a truth, an absolute, that there's nothing I can ever do that will diminish that love. Or there's nothing I can ever do to make that love bigger anyway. And that I realized that it was up to me to be able to encompass the truth of that, because I realized how much I was trying to make that love personal, and it's not. And then I had to go through a whole very long, years-long process of, if that love is impersonal, then I am just as precious as any other blade of grass. And how amazing that everything is loved to that extent. And part of me was clamoring, no, but I want to be special. I want to know it's going to be okay. And how do I find a place of, there's no guarantees of safety. How do we live in a world that is infinitely creative, infinitely loving, infinitely changing in every moment, and still find a place of belonging and balance and trust within that? Mm.
There's not many times I'm speechless on the podcast, but you've succeeded, Jacqui, to render me speechless at the moment, because there's so much to take in from that, so much richness that I can't even think where to go with it. So hand it over to you, Deni.
Yeah.
Well, the truth lands in my body, which is why it's you can feel the truthness of, I mean, for me, maybe over the last year, 2 years, I keep coming back to that same place, Jacqui, of the only thing that feels true or real is my connection with the earth. Like everything else, I just have stripped away to that's the piece that feels true, is just the word that comes up. And so I've continuously, whenever I've been in a state of not feeling too much or not feeling enough, I go back to the ocean or a tree or something that just gives me that connection again, and that instantly just settles me to feel like I'm held, feel like I'm home. So it just sits in me so beautifully, those words.
Yeah. And I think it's up to us to remember that we have that choice. Being beings of free will, we have to remember to return to that level of trust and to what's available here in the world. I'm just looking out at one of my vast trees outside. It's remembering to land ourselves within that, and that no matter what is happening in the earth and in our body, we can shift and change some of the parameters around it. And hopefully we will shift a lot of the parameters of what's happening in the earth. But I trust that it is only operating in balance, that it is responding to what's there in a way that is most healthy for the earth, or is most healthy for my body. So
there's this piece there. Can we speak to
yes.
Jacqui? There's this conversation that's been coming up this week for me, and that's around what is happening climate change wise on this to this planet, to the earth, and this place of us humans doing something to the earth as the separate place. You know, we're creating this, and then if we go to we are the earth, like the earth is us, there is no separation, then there is this other layer of the fact that what's happening to the earth is the earth doing this to itself. Like there is a rebalancing or something going on within the earth, because if there's no separation, then we're not doing this as an external force. This is happening as a part of that relationship. Is that it was this whole different landing in my system of what's happening. It's so easy to kind of separate ourselves and be the villains, and yet we're just part of the system. We're part of the whole system. So it gave me this whole different sense of view of what's happening to the earth at the moment.
Yes.
How does that do with
there's so many larger meta narratives that are going on, and I think it's really important for us to look at what are the stories that are going around. The story of humans are bad, the stories of humans where the earth would be better off without us. There's so many stories, some that have been co-opted and some that are being managed in different ways. I think it's important for us to look at, if we're looking at things from a holism place, which is not a human-centric place, then it brings us into, I guess, a place of where the earth really needs acknowledging, that it doesn't need fixing as such, but if there's a level of deep acknowledgement and deep presencing, then that disconnection isn't there anymore. We have to, it automatically starts us perceiving differently. What I'm hearing from you, Deni, is when you did that perception shift, it changed something within you. And I imagine that that is rippling out through your field and altering how you're perceiving. And that, if we could do that on a mass level, imagine what that would do to what is okay or what isn't okay. If we came from a holistic point of view, could we still make plastic? Could we still press those buttons that are dangerous? Would there be the level of debate about who is attending the upcoming global conferences or not? I feel that there's something that is so necessary about that shift in what you're describing around us stepping in and fixing, us doing. And I really believe we do need to take a level of accountability and absolute responsibility. But the framework in which we do that, I think, needs to change. If we're coming from a place of kinship, of relational experience, then that will alter how we're thinking and how we're perceiving. That will alter the questions that we're asking, which will then alter the answers that then arise. I think a perception shift is essential, as well as all of the conversations that we're having, or that we're having around the world. And might alter some of the stories that are being told.
Yeah, and those perception shifts can be so subtle and yet so powerful.
Yes, very powerful.
Yeah. I had an experience a number of years ago when I was driving in France from Paris up to Belgium, and I was going to have a retreat at a particular monastery for a while, and I was driving through Normandy. And I was driving through the farmlands through Normandy, and there's some forests here and there. And I realized, as my heart was getting heavier and heavier, that I was picking up on particular energies in the land. And I started then seeing, the soldiers in World War I, how they'd have those bandages wrapped around their legs and those enormous packs. I started seeing them. And I started seeing dead bodies, and I felt this land is still holding the pain of this. I was feeling how after so long, after 100 years, this land is holding pain, and it's holding World War I still. And I was seeing this land, it was ugly to me. And I was shocked because land is rarely ugly to me, whatever that means. But I was feeling the bereftness in the land. And I drove along and I was sort of really weeping with what was there and praying for it and offering blessings. And I got up to the Abbey and I sat talking with the St. Teresa's for a week. And I came back driving the same road and I wasn't seeing the World War One men in the same way. Something had shifted in my field and I realized that I was tapping into a different dimension. And I started seeing the beauty in the land and the resilience and the regeneration there. And I realized that I had choice in what I was perceiving, that I could choose if I wanted to. I could perceive the World War One guys and the impact of that. I could perceive the beauty and the resilience in the land. I could perceive with a whole kaleidoscopic view, and it was up to me. And the posture, the shape of my body, how I was holding myself, and where I was at in my mind and in my heart. And I realized that there were many possible answers and all sorts of questions around getting different perspectives. There was no one definitive answer at all, that all of them were true and all of them were coexisting, that there wasn't just one way. And I realized that I was believing the pain in the land of that. And that when I shifted my perspective, yes, it was there and it is true. And what is happening in the world is true. And there's other ways of perceiving it and other levels and other dimensions. And I realized, don't get caught, don't get trapped in one way. There's
Can I ask
many
you about
ways.
this?
Yes. Yeah,
Oh,
please.
this is just peace because you're reframing something for me.
Uh-huh.
I went to Sedona a few years ago
Mm.
and there was just this uncomfortableness happening at this particular time. And it felt like I needed to spend some time with the land on my own for a reason. So I climbed up this hill. I don't know what they call them over there, but it was just red dirt, a little bit like the outback here, but there's just like big mounds. And I climbed to the very top and just looked right from the top. And then over there, when you're looking down, it's like looking down a big, huge plain, and you're just seeing these rock formations. And I was just instantly thrown into this vision of being with the one of the Indigenous people and looking down on horseback at all the white soldiers, and there was obviously some kind of altercation going to happen where these Indigenous people were going to be, they were going to be in some kind of war situation. And it was just this grief that I felt, and for me at the time, I framed it as in the land wanted me to acknowledge what happened on the land. There was an acknowledgement of the pain that was in that land. And after I'd spent some time with that, there was this sense of kind of like, that was what it was asking of me. And then as I went forward, that discomfort went and I was able to do what I needed to do on that land. And so I get what you're saying about the, I could choose what part of that land I sat in, but there was a feeling in me that it wanted to acknowledge
Yes.
I needed to acknowledge the pain that had happened on that land. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I really understand that. And sometimes we need to put in our prayers and think different things will resonate with different people. And what I'm hearing from you was there was a resonance that happened between whether it was a past life or just something in that moment that opened a doorway into, here was something that was painful, and your huge heart was able to grieve with that and acknowledge it, and for that to be received. Like what I did when I was grieving for the devastation of World War One. I think our grief and our acknowledgement and our presence is important, is of immense value, and to honor what it is that comes to us, as well as keeping a sense of there's an and as well. There's this and there's that. And what I'm hearing so beautifully from you was that you're able to rest in the experience of that and offer your gorgeous heart in its fullness. And then you moved through and you stepped and you weren't held or you weren't drowning in that experience. There was a gift of grace, of the honoring and the move through. And perhaps just as much as your heart blessing and prayer and grief offered the land, maybe there was also an immense blessing and grace and offering in the way you moved through it, that you weren't stuck in it and you're not still carrying it, that there's something in that offering of, there's a shift, that you heeded a call and responded.
Mm. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
It feels like there's something in that acknowledgement of earth in that way that is what's we've been asked to do, bring our presence to that land in that way.
Yes, and that actually sort of brings me right into the third truth that came up for me, which is the truth of we are enough in this moment. We're enough. No matter where we're at, no matter how cranky or grieving or joyous, wherever we're at, that we can never take the sacred out of us. So the most glorious thing, like you brought up, the most glorious thing we can offer anything is our presence, our wholehearted, undivided presence. And that we can never underestimate what that brings. I had so many teachings last year down in Victoria on the land by myself. One was when I was walking out among all of those trees and doing what I normally do, which is I offer a blessing and a prayer, and I'll sing to one and touch it and offer them my heart. And the message that I received one day was, Jacqui, stop. Just stop. Stop doing that. Stop doing anything. And can you walk among us and just receive? Without doing anything, without blessing us, for heaven's sake, just receive. And I'm a bit embarrassed to say it took me about a month of walks before I could walk among these trees without consciously acknowledging them and just being myself among them and realizing, there's something perfect and rich in this offering of, actually this non-offering of me, and allowing myself to be received by them. And it was a massive teaching because I realized how much I constantly do or engage. And it was a teaching of just show up. You're enough. You're enough just as you are.
I think that's something that I've personally learned from coming out on retreats with you and Jane. The just the being with the land and just, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to, offer anything as your experience has been, but it's just that being and how powerful that is for us and for the land, and without it needing to be more than that. So that truth really sings to me in that respect. And I think it's something, well, I know when Deni and I do our retreats out in the land, that's something that guides me, and hopefully that's something that we bring to the experience for the women that travel with us too, is just that knowing that it's just about being there and being present and being enough in that moment.
Yeah, and that your presence matters. It has impact. Yeah. That your gaze is received. That your gaze is bringing someone more to life. That your touch, I mean, you can't touch or look at anything without being looked at or touched in return. So that touching, that gazing, that smelling is always an ongoing action of reciprocity. It's an action of ongoing engagement when you recognize that you are being received by it and that it is touching you, that you are being breathed just as much as you are breathing.
Oh, so true. And I think we both felt that when the first time we went out to Uluru together and we walked around the rock and we felt it. We did it sort of separately, but together, and we both felt that as we were walking. And then we sat down together, and I remember I had a banana and you had something, and we just had this beautiful conversation about that, just exactly that, how we both felt this presence, that we were being breathed, we were being watched, we were being, our actions, our intentions were being kind of just brought into that experience. It was amazing.
Yes, and also there's a word that you used earlier that I think is really relevant now, and that's curiosity. So I think that word in itself is so important, and it was and so it's, if we could just be with Earth and have a curiosity, just nothing more, but just that wide open wonder, without a question, just a wonder. That's when the richness starts coming alive. And that curious place, I bring that so much, like obviously as in my creativity, the curiosity is important, but I think it's so important for us now as humans to hold that place of curiosity with everything. Like curious, if we can just be curious about each other in that open-hearted way. You're different than me, I'm curious about that. Or your experiences are different, I'm curious about that, as opposed to you're wrong, I feel like this, you feel like that. Just that curiosity feels like such a big lesson in so many ways at the moment.
It opens things, doesn't it? The curiosity, it makes something more open-ended. Yes, yes. You don't have to be one thing or another, but it gives us, I guess, a place where all opposites can meet, where we can come together instead of polarizing. Yeah. What a place to meet fear with.
Yes. Yeah. It's powerful. Curiosity is such a powerful and expansive energy to work with. And I know that when I'm teaching intuition, or people to develop or connect more with their intuition, that's the one word I use a lot. Just be curious, take it inside and just be curious with it, and just explore it from that place. And
yeah. It's sort of, I was thinking of that open-endedness. It's like you're listening with everything. You're not listening for something, or you're seeing, you're looking, but usually we look for things or listen for stuff. We pick out what we recognize. We look for what we know or what we expect and miss so much else. So the curiosity seems to really invite in, I guess, like a broad beam listening, a bigger looking to see what else might be there, because we miss so much else otherwise if we often tend to only either believe what we expect or see what we anticipate.
And we feel safe in that place. I see what I'm used to and I feel safe. So curiosity in a way opens us to a place that may feel uncomfortable because it's not where we sit normally. But what you said before, Jacqui, I just have to go back to this because it's so beautiful that you said something about curiosity being this place where the two opposites can meet. I love the idea of curiosity being a place. And you bring in those two poles to have a discussion together and be curious about each other. Fuck, that's beautiful.
Yes, it's like bringing something into a big playground where you can move in. There's a spaciousness that comes in with curiosity. I don't have to agree with something or disagree or want it or not want it or anything. It's just, yeah, I'll just hang out with you. See what happens, see what comes. And we can play around together and see what there is in common and what there might not be in common. Yes, it is. It's a wondrous word. And if you think of it as, yes, I like that idea, what you brought in, Deni, of having it as a noun as well as an adjective, as well as a verb, a doing and a being, and an isness, a curious isness.
Mm.
Mm.
Oh my goodness.
Oh. And imagine the impact of curiosity on belonging, of finding a place within yourself, within our land, to be at home in, to be curious about what there is. Doesn't that just keep opening up more ands, this and.
Yes, curiosity is this endless door.
Yes.
Love it. Love it. Oh my goodness, Jacqui, I have chills all over. There has been so much wisdom. I am going to listen to this over and over again to siphon through all the bits, because there was so much and so many paths we could have gone down. Just so grateful to you and for what you bring to every woman that's walked with you, that sat with you and listened to your stories. Just such a deep gratitude that I live on a planet with you on it.
Oh my goodness. Thank you.
Well, I can't follow that, so I'll second it instead.
Oh, you beauties. Thank you so much for inviting me and into such a rich, rich space, and for thinking of those questions and actually doing it, actually setting it up and creating it and bringing your love into action in the world in this way. So all honor to you.